Looking forward to it because this is a small group and it's going to be informal and we're going to have a lot of discussions. And I think all of us have had the same experience that this is where some real progress gets made. So I'm just delighted to be here and delighted to be invited. The other thing that I'd like to say is that in the course of the next 30 minutes, if there are questions, if there's comments, because we're a small group, just raise your hand or blurt out or whatever, because I think I'm going to be going over a number of different things, and if we had some interaction, that would be really terrific. We really begin the discussions. I think we should just begin them this evening. What I'm going to do is talk a little bit about some of the activities of the National Academy of Sciences, but I want to do this as a case study of a real problem, and that is how to engage the public. So when we're talking about education of K through 12, why do we worry about the public? Well, the public is what supports us. It supports the scientists, it supports educational activities, and we can't ignore the public, and we need to get them to support our educational activities and our scientific activities. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how the National Academy has kind of wrestled with that. But to begin, if you will bear with me, I want to talk a little bit about what the National Academy is about and how we got involved in all of this activity. So the National Academy of Sciences was founded in 1863 by a number of different scientists at the time, and it was started by an act of Congress. And this is from the statement of the installation. The Academy shall, whenever called upon, is this too light? Should I turn the lights down, or are we okay? We're okay?
Can you turn off just the front light?
Okay, I'm a moron with lights, so.
Let me try.
Good, thank you. We need a physicist. Yeah, because everyone will go to sleep. You may go to sleep anyway, but let's delay it by leaving lights.
No signs, just buttons.
Yeah, do that.
I think around the corner to your
Let's
left.
try this.
Twist. I'll bet you a nickel if you go to the front desk, they can help you.
We can.
We're fine.
Carry on anyway.
Let's continue. We'll figure it out, or we won't figure it out. It'll work fine. So basically, the Academy shall, whenever called upon by any department of the government, investigate, examine, experiment, and report upon any subject of science or art. And of course, this was the mechanical arts. And then, this is another important point, the Academy shall receive no compensation whatsoever for any services to the government. Perfect, thank you.
Do you want to close the door as well?
Uh-oh.
the door. Because
It's nap time. To the government of the United States. Well, this way you can sleep and I won't know.
We don't want the lights off entirely because we want to be able to see Barbara on the videotape.
Ah, that's a good point.
That's good, that's good.
This is good.
That's good, that's good.
Okay, this is terrific. So what does the NAS do? We were chartered to provide scientific advice to the government. What we are supposed to do as an academy is to provide authoritative, timely advice on matters of science to the country. And we don't do policy, we don't recommend policy, we provide the basic science, the evidence for policy. And when the Academy was first brought together, this was the time of the Civil War, and the nation really was facing an enhanced a number of issues that were related to science. Later on, it turned out the members of the Academy themselves couldn't provide that advice. The Academy was small, and so the NRC was formed, the National Research Council, then the National Academy of Engineering, and then the Institute of Medicine. Our purpose, most people know it as an honorary society, but it really is to provide advice to the government. What we do as an academy, we produce studies. We produce massive studies on a particular topic for the government, 450 pages, etc. And these can be things that are very esoteric and have absolutely no public interest whatsoever. So an example of that would be air quality of submarines. That really has a limited audience. If you're in the Navy and in a submarine, you care passionately, but I don't know about you all, but I care. I don't want people to die on submarines, but it's not something that's in the public interest. Other issues, specialized groups. We have done reports on citrus greening disease. If you are a farmer in Florida, you care a lot about citrus greening disease. We also do a lot of reports on education. These are not something that grabs the public, but if you are a teacher, if you're an educator, if you are a group like us that are passionately interested in science education, you care deeply about that. And so these reports have really received a lot more exposure. And then finally, we do some things that really are right in the public eye. We've done a whole series of reports on climate change. One of our most recent ones talked about rising sea levels, and there was a lot of public interest in that. Another thing that we talked about and that we've done reports on is nutrition of cats and dogs. Well, many people have pets, and so that's been something that people have been very, very interested in. But we don't really reach the public very, very well. And there have been many concerned scientists, many concerned organizations, many concerned individuals that have really come to the Academy, and they've come to your organizations as well and said, you need to be doing more. You need to be doing more in terms of education, K through 12 education. You need to be providing information for K through 12 teachers. You need to be providing scientific advice how we can do K through 12 better. And we also need to engage more with the public. Because again, the public is the substrate and the real push. When the public is concerned about something, then Congress is concerned, and then things move forward. So what we've been very reluctant in the Academy to actually go to the public level, and I'll sort of talk a little bit about some of these issues. But what we really are interested in as the Academy is, can we be more effective in our communication? Can we be more effective in our education? And can we do things better? So that's kind of where we were at. A lot of concern by the Academy members, concerned by our member organizations, a lot of issues surrounding engagement of the public. So the first question, we're a science academy, so we wanted to approach this scientifically, and it turns out you can sort of approach this scientifically. I'm looking at David and kind of shrinking here. We were at a NAS regional meeting, and I talked about some of the NAS programs, and one was a future Sacklett colloquium on the science of science communication. And so David raised his hand and said, I want to question the premise about the science of science communication. And I've been fussing and worrying about that ever since. And so you're going to hear about some of that as well. But it was a really provocative question and a really important one. What can science say about communicating better to the public? What can science say about doing a better job of education? Are there scientific bases for doing things better? We're exploring that. Some people say yes, some people say no. I say, yeah, I think so, maybe. How's that for definitive? So, why are we concerned? That's the first question about why should we even take this up as an academy? Well, we know that there are many scientific issues that confront the public, that confront government officials, they confront teachers, they confront students. I think about my mother, who wants to know whether she should eat taco chips that have GM corn in them. Is she going to become ill because she eats genetically modified food derived from genetically modified crops? We also know that the economic viability of nations depends in part on a workforce that's trained in science and technology, and the economic well-being of nations depends on science and technology enterprise providing new discoveries. One of the things that we know now is that science and technology are increasingly unattractive career choices, at least for U.S. students. That's not the case worldwide. They're very attractive in other countries, but in the United States, we're losing more and more students. They go into other areas, businesses. And then finally, there's a global anti-science movement, the pushback on teaching of evolution, on climate change, on GM, and I'll have more to say about those things. So these are really concerning, and they're concerning to us in how we interact with the public, and they're concerning with what we can do with education, because there are parents behind our children, and the parents are pushing back on some of these topics.
Question, is it global or is it US?
I think there are global There are, in some countries, there's a push, the U.S. seems to be a leader in this anti-science movement, but we are not alone.
We may be the leaders in it.
Right, and that's actually a concern. There's a lot of anti-evolution, for example, in Turkey. Korea just had some changes in its education against not teaching evolution, which was absolutely shocking to me because Korea is such an advanced country in terms of its education. So these are things that really concern us. So why do we communicate science? Why do we want to communicate science? What are our goals? As an academy, we want to build a science-literate public and government that can make science-based decisions to enhance citizens' lives. My concern about my mom. We want to build science literacy to ensure understanding of public policy and also evidence-based policy, that policy should be based on scientific evidence. We want to incur an adequate science and technology workforce, and we want to build appreciation and support and interest in science so that we can have better policy and so we can have better education. So really, in order to move forward, we need to expand what we do, and that's been a strong feeling in the academy. And we've got a problem in the academy. Not a problem, but we have an issue. And that is, if you look at how influence moves in terms of our society, you have public policy makers, and they send policy down to opinion leaders, and these are people such as people that write for the New York Times are opinion leaders. Then we have influentials. These are local community things. These are community leaders. These are business people. These are community organizers, and there are teachers. And then all of this flows down. The information flows down, and these influence the public. And the public, of course, comes back and influences very strongly the policymakers. So there's kind of a cycle of influence. The National Academy, because we speak up here, our mission is to speak up there. We've been very reluctant to go below this line and to actually interact with the public because it's something that we have had no history with, we don't know how to do, and it's really expensive. So we've concentrated in this area here, and we're interested in really promoting materials at that level. And this is really a little bit more about the reason why. Here's the ability to influence an audience, and here's the importance to a mission. And of course, what you want to do is to go to an area where you have the highest ability to influence and the most important to the mission. So we've been sort of staying right here. But we really felt that we needed to do more in some of these other spaces because we're so concerned. We're concerned about education and concerned about communicating directly with the public because some of these indicators are really a concern. I think for the well-being of our citizens, the well-being of the country, and the well-being of just the whole global community. So how do we do this? Well, at the NAS, we've worked very, very hard on doing a lot of educational materials. So we've worked on developing K through 12 science curricula. There's websites on the wiki, there's links to all of these things. We've designed undergraduate science courses, and in fact, we have a very important collaboration with the Howard Hughes Institute to actually work with biology instructors to develop large biology courses that deal with modern methods of instruction, hands-on science education, inquiry-based science education. We've tried to reach students through museum programs, and we have the Koshland Science Museum, and they've developed programs that now go out to other museums. And then we've tried to really begin to train scientists as expert communicators so they can communicate not just to the public but to teachers and to other individuals. And then we don't know what to do. Then we felt like we had to somehow have greater influence, but how do you do that? How can we actually really take the good material that we have, and that we have great material. We can convene the best scientists on the topic and give you a report on levels of arsenic in drinking water, air quality in submarines, guidelines for stem cell research. How can we communicate this good material? Preventing obesity in children. These are
Barbara,
all...
I would add to that list how does the academy get its members to be more engaged in all of this?
Yeah, well, that's, I'd love to know how to do that. And that's something we should discuss in a small group. But how do you get, and it's not just an academy, how do you get your colleagues? You all are a select group because you're passionate about this. How do you get your colleague down the hall to want to do K through 12 education, to really want to do it, not because they have to check it off on some on their CV or on a grant application, but because they really passionately want to do it? How do we get people to want to passionately engage with the public because they need to do it, because they want to do that?
Recognition.
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably not likely that someone will be elected to the academy based on the quality of their public engagement.
And unfortunately, it's unlikely someone's going to get tenure
Right.
as a university professor.
So it's a cultural thing within the science.
Yeah, actually, I think there's a potential role for the academy, which we should talk about, in engaging university presidents and provosts on this issue of awarding great credit to their faculty who are engaged and paying real attention to this, regarding this as a significant portion of their educational mission. The academy has a kind of convening power that very few institutions have.
I absolutely agree. I think that we are the ones that could, in fact, really put pressure. So here you have the National Academy of Science saying that we consider not only research as absolutely critical for science in the United States, but also engagement absolutely critical for science. It just redefines what science is. We do a whole bunch of stuff, and the wiki is fabulous. I think you've got links to just about all of these things, and so if you actually want to see some of our particular programs, this is the place to go. What I want to do is just talk a little bit about our NRC reports and then go into the science of science communication, because it just happened recently and so I'm interested. So we produce 400-page reports written for our sponsors, and they can be really heavy. There's great material in there. So here's an example. We can do a report on nutrition research, and you can get dietary reference intakes. And this is something that goes specifically to really the sponsor. But everybody's interested in nutrition. All of us in this room are, particularly because it's really dinner time. Dietitians, nutritionists, educators, and students. So what you can do is take these large reports, and we've got stacks of them, and actually build summary products, we call them derivative products. And they're written so that, in fact, they are really accessible. We also have the same sort of thing. We have we have a division that deals with education. And again, we have these massive studies, and then we derive products from them that are accessible to teachers, to people that develop curriculum, administrators, and science specialists. So this material, yeah,
Can you buy them on Amazon?
you can buy them, but you can get them free. You can download them free.
But is it easy to do so?
Yes,
or
it's
do you have to go
absolutely-
through the National Academy website?
You can.
or-
Some of these are available on Amazon, but you can go to the National Academy of Sciences on their National Academies Press, and
Yeah,
you
but I think most people wouldn't go there if they were wanting to find.
yeah, and you know,
easy
you
book.
raise
That's really my point.
you raise a great point.
Can
We
the
are
public get these easily?
our websites in the past have been user unfriendly. We're working really hard to make them user-friendly. The real problem is that when you do a Google, you have to know that this stuff is there to find it. What we need to do is to make ourselves much more active in terms of Google and also Wikipedia. So I chair the Division of Earth and Life Studies in the National Research Council, and we're working with people from Wikipedia to actually begin to reference our material in Wikipedia, because a lot of us go there first for information.
Well, particularly
but-
students.
But accessibility, you just hit it right on the head, the nail right on the head. That's a problem. Yeah.
Barbara, do you see the academy focusing, would you say, more on the informal community, science museums, et cetera, versus the formal community? And I think the formal community being the school science teacher in a 10th grade biology class, as well as university Has there been distinctive focus, one versus the other, or a higher priority?
You're giving us too much credit, like we actually have a plan. Oh, and this is on videotape. That's really bad. What we are trying to do is we recognize the importance of the formal, and so we have a whole series of beautiful, I think they're beautiful reports. We have a science specialist, Jay Laboff, who is helping with derivative products and interacting, and he's just terrific. We have our best, our really best people in that section. We also have the Science Museum, and that's really terrific. It's informal, and we do a lot of statistics, and people come to our Koshland Science Museum, and they spend longer, like sometimes 2 to 3 times longer than most people do on particular exhibits. We're trying to really do the whole gamut, and we're trying to find out what works really well for us. And so we're actually, we know that we do science education well, and we know how to do these derivative products. We're actually trying to experiment much more with the informal. The Koshland does really well, but we're trying other things, and I'm going to try to speak a little, well, I shouldn't speak faster, but we're trying to really get to some of those informal things. We're not going to get to it, so I'm going to talk about one right now, and that's the Science and Entertainment Exchange. So this, let me back up. I love talking about this stuff. So this is a TV show called Numbers. We also have the Big Bang show on television. You probably haven't seen that, but it's like one of the most popular TV shows. I actually think it's hilarious. They reach millions of people, television shows. And so what we tried to do, and this is by Ralph Cicerone, who's the president of the National Academy. He has really strong connections in California and has some personal friends that are important producers in Hollywood. And so what we set up as an experiment was the Science and Entertainment Exchange. And the idea here is to get connections between producers and writers that use the media with scientists. And that has been going on for about a year. There's been over 400 consultations, and we've had the scientists have had input into now a number of movies and television shows to try to really portray scientists rather than like the mad person doing harm, but really portray us in a much more favorable light, to portray science as being something that's accessible, that can be fun and interesting and engaging. So all of the things that we really want the public to understand about science, you can do this through through entertainment. And a really good example was there was a TV show called ER, Emergency Room, I guess. And they had a show that talked about the human papillomavirus and vaccinations. And there were a number of surveys done before and after this television show. And what it showed was that there was a lot of people that actually learned about the papillomavirus and the importance of vaccination through this television show. And so these are the kinds of things that we think, as an experiment, we think we can do. And this one is an experiment that has turned out really well. I think some of us, and I probably was in that group, was a little bit skeptical that this would actually work, and it seems to have worked really well. So we're trying to do this informal sort of thing as well. It's a challenge for us, because we do tend to be dry, which I love. I mean, for me, the reason I'm in the working with the Academy is because I love the science. We also do just very short reports from some of our really important studies. And then we do all kinds of things. Again, what these sorts of things are. So we had a large report on the new science of metagenomics. And then we do a report in a website, and the audience here will be the sponsors and government scientists and some of the interested public. But then we go to a targeted audience of agronomy, and then we begin to go to things that are available for teachers and for students. And so what we're trying to do is to take what we think is really good content, and instead of just having these very heavy reports that very few people read, we actually really wanted to spread our material out. And I think you've hit exactly on the issue, is we've done the work, and now how do we get people to pay more attention to it?
Yeah, because I'm thinking of a parent in Tennessee or some place like that where, you know, the schools are really being pushed to be
Yeah.
fairly anti-science.
So here we go.
You know, say that that parent really wants to have good information that they can give to their child. Can they get it from you easily? Do they know how to get there? Can you tell them how to get there?
Well, I mean, the issue is how do you get that first contact? How do
Yeah,
people know
yeah.
to go to the national academies and to get
Mm-hmm.
this? So that's one of the reasons why we tend to work a little higher up on that pyramid, because those are the people that we interact with, and that when we say we're the National Academy of Sciences, they actually interact and understand. So I want to show you an example of something that we've done that really deals with something very important in education and in science and in public. And this is a booklet that we produced on science, evolution, and creationism to deal with the challenges to the teaching of evolution in particularly high school classrooms. And this booklet was actually used in the Dover decision to define what science is. And so this is something that's had a lot of traction, this booklet. And so we wrote it for policymakers and for scientists, for religious leaders, so for a large group of individuals, including teachers and educators. We sent this, for example, to school boards. We sent copies to various school boards that were involved in some of the evolution battles. And I have to say, this is someone I did receive an extremely outraged voice message from someone who said, "How dare I send this to the school board?" and that they were going to get all the churches together and they were going to sue me. So there's a lot of pushback on some of these topics, but we did this one. The reason I'm giving you a little bit of history on this is because it raises a really important point. So this is the third edition of this booklet. And Ralph Cicerone, our president, said, if this booklet is so good, why do we have to keep on revising it again and again and again? It's because this topic doesn't go away. If the booklet were really effective, we wouldn't need all of these various editions. This was done in a very different way, and it relates to education and providing material. Usually what we do is we, as professionals, write a report, and then we write it as we would without really interacting much with the audience. In this case, what we did was we tested the messages and we tested the issues with audiences and focus groups before the revision began. I'm an evolutionary biologist, and evolutionary biologists love Darwin's finches on the Galapagos Islands. It's the classic study of evolution, and it's even better now because we do development biology and molecular biology, and it's just a breathtaking story. So of course we wanted to put Darwin's finches in this. Well, I was devastated to learn that in fact the public doesn't care about a bunch of finches that look the same except for slight differences in their beak shape. It's completely uncharismatic. What the public was interested in was the evolution of bird flu and influenza. That's what they were interested in. And so we've changed the examples in response to these surveys. And after we wrote the thing, we tested it with audiences, including teachers and school boards, because they were going to be using this. We tested it with members of the clergy, business leaders and scholars, etc. So a very different sort of thing. We talked about creationist perspectives in this book, something that there was a lot of discussion not to do, but we did put that in there. We talked a little bit about why we objected to the creationist perspectives and basically talked about not blending science with belief systems. And we did the standard, then we had to put in the evidence for biological evolution, and we talked really about some of the important things in evolution that were used as examples against evolution, and we also talked about things that the public was interested in. There were two controversial statements in this report, and we got pushback from both sides of the argument. And these are true statements. You may not like these statements, you may not like it that this is true, but in fact it is true that some religions in fact agree that evolution is responsible for biological diversity on life. If you are 100% creationist, you don't like that. But some religions, in fact, including the Catholic Church, are comfortable with evolution. That's a truth. Evolution is a truth in my mind, but it's also true that some religions are completely comfortable with evolution. And then there is another statement that we got pushback from, and that is that some scientists are deeply religious. And this was, some people didn't like that, didn't like it that we said that, but in fact it's absolutely true. And then here are pictures of Darwin's finches because I had to put them in because I do like them.
Why is it pushback for some scientists are deeply religious? Where was the pushback?
We call them the evangelical atheists.
Okay.
Think Dawkins.
Evangelical atheist.
Yeah. Yeah, it was Richard Dawkins. Said that the Academy had sold out because we actually addressed the religious issue. And that was something that I felt very strongly about, that the arguments against it and the pushback was a religious one, and so we would be remiss not to talk about religion because we're not theologians, that's not our area of expertise, and it would be totally improper to talk about it. But we could make those statements because they're true and we had evidence for that. So can we actually get the public to change? Can we get the parents to not pressure teachers in Tennessee high schools? So this is a recent Gallup poll. You're going to have trouble seeing this, and I'm sorry the graphic isn't better. It was the best I could do. We also have, this data is from 2010. We have a data point for 2012 that just came out from a Gallup poll. This is, this top line is the percentage that God created humans in the present form. It starts out in 1982 at 44, a high of 47, drops to 40 in 2010, and is up to 43. So 43% of the people believe in 100% creationist. That's this top line. This middle line here, humans evolved, but God had no part, God created humans, but they evolved with God guiding. About 38% of the people feel that that's correct. And then here are humans evolved, but God had no part in it. What I want you to take from this is these are pretty much flat lines. So no matter what people do, the opinions seem not to change on this. And this is an interesting fact, that we seem to be unable to change that. If we look at the belief in evolution by country, I think many of you may have seen this. The Iceland has the most people. This is 80%. About 80% of people in Iceland believe in evolution. At the very bottom is Turkey. About 20 or 30, 25% of people believe in evolution. And the United States is second from the bottom. The U.S., 30%, or almost maybe 40% of the people believe in evolution. So in terms of a global issue, the United States is not the leader in being against evolution, but we are right behind Turkey in that.
Right in there with Turkey.
You mentioned Turkey, but you might want to highlight for our colleagues that there's a very wealthy person in Turkey who's actually disseminating what look like textbooks on this subject.
And have any of you seen this? I forget the name of it. It's this giant book that is unbelievably elaborate and beautiful. And it's a creationist book with doctored fossils and all sorts of things. And it must, I don't know, it must be what, $150 for, and the books have been sent to everybody. We use it as a doorstop. It's a massive amount of money behind this. I don't know how effective he's been in Turkey, judging by the statistics, it sure looks like.
The Turkish government has essentially taken an anti-science position. They destroyed their Academy of Sciences, so the scientists have had to create a new academy. And it really is all about evolution, because the Academy of Sciences had a magazine, a journal, that did an issue in honor of Darwin, and the government did not like it at all, and forces within them persuaded the leadership to absolutely take over the Turkish Academy of Sciences.
Yeah. Which is really, I think there's been a lot of protest written to the Turkish leadership, but it hasn't been effective. Is there hope for evolution? This is belief in evolution by education level. The dark green is the one that's important. That's yes, you believe in evolution. This is high school or less. This is if you have some college, if you're a college graduate, and if you're postgraduate. It goes from 21% to 41% to 53 to 74. So education is important.
What was the actual question that was asked?
You know, this is a Gallup poll, and I can't remember the question.
'Cause I'm
These
sure
are.
that would vary dramatically.
Oh, it's
depending on-
incredibly variable by the nature of the question.
But I'm worried
So
about the
this-
causal direction of that association. I've seen this before, and one of the things that I always think about is how do you know that the people that go to college and that graduate aren't the people that are in that first green bar in high school? You know, it's a selected process. So
Yeah.
maybe the education doesn't improve it very much. Maybe it's just those are the people that go all the way through.
I'm not a Gallup poll person. There's an association.
I think that's a good point, and also, both sides can use that data to their advantage, because the anti-evolution people can say, it's just evidence of a conspiracy.
Absolutely. And I'm going to use it as saying there's hope. If we educate people, they might be better at thinking about things. What about climate change? That's another possibility. We've done a lot of work on climate change. Again, National Academy Press, you can download all of these studies for free. It's something we did in the last year. It caused a massive budget restructuring, but it's a really important thing. This is all available now. So here's a recent study. This is from the Yale Project on Climate Change, and also George Mason University, and this just came out. And do you think that global warming is happening? Now, this is just data extracted from lots of tables with lots of different questions. And this is 2008, 2010, 2008, November, 2010, January, June, May 2011, November 2011, and March just 3 months ago. Yes, global warming is happening. It was a high of 71 in 2008. Then we had ClimateGate, and it went to a low of 57% believed in it. In that global warming is happening, and it's slowly been increasing, and now we're back up to 66%. So what does this mean? Well, if you're an optimist, you say people can change their minds about scientific issues. It's unlike evolution. I think the problem is, in this case, it's not the direction that scientists would want.
Barbara, does anyone, has there been any sort of effort to understand or to educate the scientific community about this? Because this was a self-directed injury. In some sense, we did this to ourselves because perhaps, you know, as I understand ClimateGate, someone had access to confidential emails. Of course, we're used to rough and tumble in our discussions, and we're often disparaging because we have hard egos and high, you know, we go elbows high. But the fact that the public doesn't know this played exactly into the hands of the climate deniers.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in some sense, we need to think about our own ethos and sort of extracting good science.
I absolutely agree. It was in part a self-inflicted wound. And you can see the effect of it. Oops, well, you could have seen the effect. You can also just really begin to parse this a little bit more about global warming is happening. And you can see that the dark blue is you're extremely sure, the light blue is you're very sure it's happening, and then the red is you're not sure. And you can see it's gone down 25 to 14% were extremely sure, 26 to 20%. And then here, global warming is not happening. You can see some increases. And then the other thing is that don't know increased in percentage a little bit. So in terms of science, you begin to parse out some of these opinions that people have, and you can see that different groups are responding differently. Different backgrounds, different philosophies give you different things, different propensities for change. I've got a lot more stuff, and I'm obviously not going to go through it. One other thing that's a little bit hopeful is that, in fact, this is public trust in science, and this is something that just came out. I know we talked about it at one of our NAS council meetings. It just came out in 2012 in March, I think. And what this shows is public trust in science. And the thing that's really interesting is if you ignore right here, and I'd love to ignore from this point on, you can see that with the diamonds up there, those are people that are liberal, and their trust in science is pretty high, and it seems fairly very constant. So this is 78, this is 1990, this is 2002, 2010 is the last survey. Moderates are the diamonds here, and they again are fairly constant. What's really changed is the boxes, and those are the conservatives. So people that are politically conservative, their trust in science has declined, which is again very interesting. Again, you can parse this out. This is a question from Climate Change in the American Mind. It's 2012, and again, it's the Yale Project on Climate Change Communication in George Mason University. And what this does is, again, blue is you strongly trust, light blue is somewhat trust, the reds are distrust and strongly distrust. So
Fascinating.
people don't trust very much consumer companies, even good ones like Levi Strauss and Nike. They really don't trust car companies, and they really, really don't trust oil and gas companies. Good. Again, it's about climate change. Who do you trust? Again, blue is good. Climate scientists. They trust climate scientists more than anybody else. Other kinds of scientists. Television weather reporters. And the mainstream news media. So what this means is we're dealing with political philosophy and heterogeneity and who the message is coming from. So it's a very complicated sort of thing. And the conclusions are that the American public's opinion can change, positively or negatively. We've seen some negative ones. And the other thing that's important is the public still has some trust in scientists. And so I think there's some opportunities there. Now, I was going to talk about the science of science communication, but that's, I think I should stop, because I think one of the things that you learn when you start thinking about the science of science communication is that there's biological limitations. One of them is how much you can keep in your head. How you have short-term memory is a limited quantity. And so there's the idea of talking, you can only remember 7 things, 5 if you're not so good at memory, 9 if you're good. So that's really hard, and you all now have a lot of things in your short-term memory, and it's going to be hard for me to add anything new. And the other thing that's even more limiting is attention. It's really hard to pay attention, particularly, and this is biological, it's neurobiology. It's hard to keep attention because other things are competing for your attention. So I'm talking to you and you're paying attention maybe to me, what I'm saying now, but you're also thinking about those diagrams that I showed you and why are they those different colors and why were they so shiny. And then you're thinking about it was really hard getting here and I had to drive a long way and the flight was bumpy and now I'm hungry and I've had a glass of wine and I'm tired and wouldn't she please be quiet. So there's a lot of biological reasons about why it's difficult to communicate. And what the science of science communication is listing those limitations, understanding our neurobiology, and then using that information in combination with these sorts of things to really effectively communicate better and to teach better. And so I should stop now because I've been blathering on for a long time. So I hope that we can take up some of these themes and discuss them over the next 2.5 days because there's some really interesting things to talk about. And that's it.
Thank you so much, Barbara.